there are two positive commandments in the Torah regarding Amalek, the Amalekites. One is to remember what the Amalekites had done to us when we left Egypt, how they had attacked us when we left Egypt, when we were weary, and therefore the Torah tells us in the book of Shmos, you should obliterate Amalek from under the heavens. Kial Keis Kol. God says, my throne is not complete until Amalek is obliterated and destroyed, that there is no remnant or memory or trace of their existence. And God says, unless they are obliterated, in Kisei Shlema, my throne is not complete. What did they do so terribly? So they attacked us. We've had many enemies throughout history who attempted to obliterate us. The attack at that moment, why is that worse than all the upheavals and the holocausts and destructions which we experienced throughout history? Chazal tell us that when we were attacked by Amalek, by the Amalekites, this nomad band of people, it was right after the splitting of the sea. When Moshe Rabbeinu, together with the Jewish people, had sung the song at the sea, they had said that the awesomeness of the miracle of the splitting of the sea had caused that the nations of the world not only stood in awe of the Jewish people, but rather they trembled, understanding the relationship between God and the Jewish people. That the Jewish people were at another level and they were truly not approachable. Because what God did for the Jewish people, He's never done in the history of existence for any people. The splitting of the sea, the destruction of the greatest, most powerful army in the world, Pharaoh, his chariot corps, his cavalry, his armies, they were all destroyed in the sea. The sea closed upon them. And if that would have been the aura that the Jewish people had in the eyes of the world, was it at such a level that ultimately we would have been that beacon of truth to the world, and ultimately everyone, every nation, would have abandoned paganism and accepted God. And it would have been Voy Hashem L'melech HaKol Oretz. God would have been proclaimed as the omnipotent king, that nothing exists outside of him. However, Chazal depict the Amalekites as a fool, an unstable person who jumps into a scalding bath. That when he jumps into the bath, he gets burnt from the scalding hot water. But nevertheless, although he is burnt, he cooled the bath down for others. For others, the bath becomes approachable. Identically, when the Amalekites attacked us, there was a statement to the world. The Jews are approachable. They are no different than us. As a result of what they had done, that aura, that specialness, that reverence which they had, that they esteemed, and seeing the Jewish people as God's people, evaporated, was diminished instantaneously. Therefore, the world reaching its state of perfection, that the world in its entirety would accept God as the king, as the only king, as the omnipotent king, that there's no other power outside of him, would not be. Therefore, God says, my throne will never be complete. Al Keis Kol, the word throne is kiseg, the aleph is missing. The throne is incomplete until the Amalekites are obliterated from the face of the earth, from under heaven. However, maybe there's another way to explain it. There's a famous Ibn Ezra on the 10 Commandments, when he speaks about the commandment of Lo Tachmod, that a Jew is not permitted to have designs on his fellow's property, his animal, his wife. You cannot have designs and envy. Negative commandment. So the Ibn Ezra asks, anything in the Torah, one is not permitted to violate the Shabbos. One's not permitted to violate dietary laws. One must give charity. One must put on tefillin, whatever it may be. Because it's a perfunctory act, one is able to force himself to refrain or to do, or to act, be proactive. However, not to have envy, not to have designs, which is rooted in the person feels that he is denied because he doesn't have what the other person has. How does one take control of those feelings? So how does the Torah impose such a hefty responsibility that it should be bound with a negative commandment, that if one has that level of envy for another person's wife, possession, or whatever it may be, he's in violation of this negative commandment? This is the question which is asked by the Ibn Ezra. So the Ibn Ezra explains and elucidates this with a simple answer, but it's profound. He explains that if you have a prince and you have a princess, the princess is beautiful, poised, intelligent, exceptional. The city dweller or the villager is not envious of the prince because he has such a special woman to take as a wife. Why? Because the person understands, because he's not of royalty, it's something which he has no relevance to. And anything that a person realizes is beyond his reach, he does not envy, he does not desire whatsoever, because it is beyond his reach. However, if a person who's a peer possesses something or has something, and he feels that because they're within the same classification of human being and person and societal class, if the other person has it, why shouldn't he have it? So he feels that what the other person has is within the realm of his grasp. That is the basis for envy. I mean, I would say if something is on the moon, regardless of what it is, as much as you want it, understanding that it's not reachable, you don't think about it, you don't envy it, you don't desire it, because it's foolishness, because you know factually it's not something within the realm of availability to you. So the Ibn Ezra writes that if a person would understand that each person's predicament in life, materially, wife-wise, spouse-wise, any-wise, the reason why that person has it is because it's godly given. It's ordained by God, that should be that person's predicament. It's him and not you. And if a person would understand, it's no different than something being impossibly reachable, out of his reach, the person would not have any desire or designs or envy to have that, whatever that may be. Therefore, the negative commandment, Lo Tachmod, is within the grasp of every person, understanding and having this belief of reality of what one has is meant to be his, and what someone else has is meant to be theirs. The Midrash tells us that at the time of the giving of Torah at Sinai, the world quaked, and everyone was aware that the Jewish people were taken by God as his people, as his kingly priestly nation, and they were his chosen. And the question is, and it was a public event, was there any envy at that moment? Seemingly, based on the principle of the Ibn Ezra, being taken by God as being his royal son, there should not be envy. Because the Jews are special. They're in a class unto themselves, which are, the rest of the world are not within that class. But what did Amalek? But when were we viewed with that aura, with this special, exalted status? That was after the splitting of the sea. Because what God did for us, it never happened in the existence of the world. So that immediately catapulted us to a level of class which was unequaled. The world understood what the Jews are has no relevance to them. That was the aura, that was the trembling. They trembled from just the thought of the Jew. To them, the Jew was unapproachable. What did Amalek do? Amalek went and they reduced the Jew to a peer level. The Jews are approachable. They are no different than we are. So the Midrash tells us what happened at Sinai. The Talmud tells us that at Sinai we reached the pinnacle of our spirituality, and the world would have achieved this level of spiritual completion. But because the Jews sinned with the golden calf, this brought the world back to pro-sin of Adam. And therefore, all the exiles and all the suffering continued because we sinned with the golden calf. Now the question is, why did we sin with the golden calf? After hearing the commandments directly from the mouth of Hashem, how do we sin with idolatry? The first two commandments, I am God. I am your God who took you out of Egypt. You should not make graven images, which is idolatry. How do we fail so seriously in this particular area? So the Midrash tells us, Lo avdu Yisrael es ha'egel ela mipnei ayin hara. The nations of the world, they had given the evil eye to the Jewish people because they were envious that they were given the Torah, the Jewish people, and the world was denied the Torah. Now, why were they envious? Why was the ayin hara applicable at that moment? Because the Amalekites said they are not of an exalted class, but they are of a peer level. And within the context of a peer level, what you have, I should have. So the cause of the reason why the world did not come to its level of perfection was because of the sin of the golden calf. But the Jews only sinned with the golden calf because they were perceived by the world as no different than they were. Who was the cause of that perception? That was the Amalekites who attacked us after the splitting of the sea. They are the unstable person who jumped into scalding bath. Therefore God says, to who do I attribute all the desecration of my name till the end of time and all the suffering? These are the Amalekites, because if they wouldn't have attacked the Jews, there would have never been ayin hara. There would have never been the evil eye based on the principle and the interpretation of the Ibn Ezra of Lo Tachmod. So the reason why the world is not at its perfect state and why there is the desecration of God's name on a continuous level, it's all attributed to Amalekites. Therefore God says it's unforgivable. My throne, because my throne is not complete because of them until they are obliterated from the face, from under the heavens, from the face of the earth of that evil, my throne can never be reestablished and can be completed.